Before the war, the heaviest thing I carried was a hod of bricks. I knew its weight, the way it settled on my shoulder, the rhythm of walking the scaffold. I was Dmitry Volkov, a bricklayer from Smolensk. I understood foundations, mortar, the precise, patient work of building something that would stand against time. In the autumn of 1943, I was still carrying a heavy load, but it was an R105 radio set, and the only thing I was trying to build was a future for the motherland. The mud of the Yelnya salient was a different kind of mortar. It was cold, gritty, and it smelled of iron and decay. It clung to my boots, to my greatcoat, to the very soul. We were pushing the fascists back, reclaiming our soil foot by bloody foot. My soil. Smolensk wasn't just a name on a map for me. It was the smell of my mother's kitchen, the feel of the sun on the bricks of the Assumption Cathedral. It was home. And they had broken it. We were here to lay a new foundation on the rubble. The order to advance came just after dawn, whispered down the line like a prayer. The air was thick with mist and the tension of 100 men holding their breath. I adjusted the straps of the radio, the cold metal frame a familiar discomfort against my spine. My antenna man, Sasha, a boy from Voronezh with eyes that were still too clear, gave me a tight nod. He held the long whip antenna, our lifeline to the command post, to the artillery, to everything that wasn't this hellish ditch. My job was to be the nerve ending of the platoon. To listen, to report, to be the bridge of words and clicks over the chasm of chaos. It was a meticulous job. Setting the frequency, tuning the dial until the voice of command cut through the static, it was like laying the first perfect course of bricks. Everything had to be level, precise. A mistake could cost lives. A dead radio, that was my deepest fear. Not the shells, not the bullets, but the silence. The silence meant you were alone. It meant your comrades were blind and deaf. It was the sound of death. The whistle blew. We went over the top. The world dissolved into a symphony of damnation. The ground shook with the crump of our own artillery landing ahead, churning the already broken earth. The German machine guns opened up, a sound like a giant tearing a canvas sheet over and over. Men grunted, men fell. We pressed on, moving from one shell-scarred crater to the next. The landscape was a ruin, a construction site where the devil was the architect. Splintered trees were like snapped support beams, collapsed farmhouses like failed foundations. Sasha was good. He kept the antenna low as we ran, raising it only when we found cover so I could send our progress reports. I'd kneel, one hand on the handset, the other steadying the tuning knob, my words clipped and precise. Kestrel, this is Falcon 1, advance to grid square 479er, taking fire from fortified position, requesting support. My voice was calm, the voice of a man checking a plumb line. Inside, my heart hammered against my ribs like a carpenter's frantic blows. We took the first German trench in a rush of fury and bayonets, the air filled with the coppery smell of blood and the acrid bite of cordite. We didn't stop. The momentum was everything. We pushed toward a small ridge, the key to this sector. From there, we could see the approaches to Yelnya itself. The Germans knew it too. Their resistance stiffened. Mortar rounds began to walk towards us, each explosion a monstrous fist punching the earth, sending geysers of mud and steel into the air. Down, our lieutenant screamed. We flattened ourselves into the mud, trying to make ourselves part of the earth. I curled my body around the radio set. It was more important than me. It was the voice of the entire company. A shell landed close, the concussion wave hitting me like a solid wall, stealing the air from my lungs. My ears rang with a high, thin whine. Then came the sound I will never forget. Not a bang, but a sharp, metallic thwack, followed by a sickening wet crackle. It was right on top of us. The world went white and deafeningly loud for a second. I was thrown sideways, my face pressed into the cold mud. The weight on my back was gone. I twisted, my mind a frantic blur. The radio lay a few feet away, its metal casing dented, a wisp of smoke curling from its side. Sasha was on the ground, groaning, his hand clutching his shoulder where a piece of shrapnel had torn through his coat. The whip antenna lay beside him, snapped in two like a dry twig, and then I heard it. Nothing. The beautiful, life-affirming hiss and crackle of the ether was gone. My headset was filled with a dead, hollow void. The silence, my deepest fear made real. Panic seized me, cold and sharp. I scrambled to the radio, my fingers fumbling with the latches. The vacuum tubes were shattered. The main wire from the antenna port was severed. It was a corpse, useless. At that same moment, the distinctive crack of a Mauser rifle echoed from the ridge. A bullet kicked up mud a hand's breadth from my head. Sniper. He had us pinned. Our advance had stalled. The rest of the platoon was taking cover, returning fire, but we were exposed. The lieutenant crawled over. Volkov, get me artillery. There's a counterattack forming. I see panzers behind that copse of trees, he pointed. I could just make out the angular shapes of German armor massing for a push that would break us, roll us back, annihilate us. The radio is dead, Comrade Lieutenant. Antenna is gone, I shouted over the gunfire. The look on his face was one I'd never seen before. It was the look of a man watching the foundation of his house crumble away. Despair. But then something shifted in my mind. The panic receded, replaced by a cold, meticulous focus. The builder took over. This was just a problem of structure and connection. I looked at the broken set, at the severed wires. I looked around me, a destroyed fence line with wire still clinging to it, the splintered remains of a tall birch tree, a long shard of wood pointing to the sky. Raw materials. Cover me, I yelled, not waiting for an answer. I crawled towards Sasha, who was being dragged back by a medic. Your wire cutters, I gasped. He fumbled them out of his belt pouch. Another sniper round whizzed past, so close I felt the heat of its passage. I ignored it. I was a man with a job to do. I cut a long section of the telephone wire from the ruined fence post. Back at the radio, I worked with a frantic precision. My fingers, usually steady laying brick, now flew across the damaged components. I bypassed the shattered antenna port, stripping the insulation from the fence wire with my teeth. The metallic taste was grounding. I found the internal lead and began to twist my makeshift wire around it, wrapping it tight. It wasn't a proper solder, but like a good mortar joint, it had to hold. I wrapped the connection in a strip of cloth torn from my own uniform to keep it from grounding against the case. Now for the structure, the antenna. I crawled to the shattered birch tree, the sniper's bullets thudding into the wood around me. He was playing with me, trying to break my nerve, but my world had shrunk to this single task. I pulled a long, straight piece of splintered wood free. It was about 2 meters long, perfect. I crawled back, dragging my new mast behind me. I propped the wood against a lump of earth, angling it up. I tied the loose end of my fence wire to the top. It was ugly. It was a mess. But I knew structure. It would stand. I took a deep breath and flipped the power switch. For a terrible second, there was only that same dead silence. My heart stopped. I nudged the frequency dial a fraction of a millimeter, and then a crackle. A faint, ghostly hiss. Kestrel, this is Falcon 1. Do you read me? Over. I spoke into the handset, my voice hoarse. Static. Nothing. Kestrel, this is Falcon 1. Urgent. Do you copy? Over. A voice faint, swimming in static, but it was there. Falcon 1 read you. Barely send traffic. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. The lieutenant was beside me, his eyes wide. The Panzers. Grid 942715, a whole company of them. Tell them to fire for effect. I relayed the coordinates, my voice a steel rod in the storm of static and gunfire. I repeated them. Then I repeated them again, making sure each number was as clear and solid as a perfectly laid cornerstone. The sniper was still trying to kill me, but he was too late. The message was sent. Then we waited. The seconds stretched into an eternity. The German engines revved in the distance, the clank of their treads growing louder. They were coming. We were out of time. And then the sky tore open. It started as a low whistle, then grew into an unholy scream. The Katyusha rockets, our Stalin's organs. A wave of explosions erupted in the copse of trees, a wall of fire and steel. The earth bucked and trembled. We saw one panzer brew up, a torch of black smoke and orange flame. Another slewed to a halt, its turret blown clean off. The counterattack was broken before it even began. The pressure on our front vanished. The German infantry, their armor support shattered, fell back. The sniper on the ridge went silent. A cheer went up from our lines, a ragged, exhausted, triumphant sound. I just knelt there, my hand still on the handset, listening to the beautiful, beautiful static. I looked at my creation, a piece of a dead tree and a length of stolen wire, all held together with desperation and a bricklayer's stubborn refusal to let things fall. It had held. The connection had held. The line had held. Later, as we consolidated our position on the ridge, I found a moment to sit. The adrenaline was gone, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness. I looked out over the smoldering fields towards my Smolensk. I was no hero. I was just a man who understood how to build things. That day under fire, I had not laid a single brick, but I had reinforced a wall of Soviet flesh and blood. And I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that our foundation was sound. It would not crumble. These memories are heavy, but they must be shared. Subscribe to ensure these stories are never forgotten.